They don't obey because you demand it. They obey because you've made disobedience feel impossible. Machiavelli understood something most people refuse to accept. Authority is not given, it is engineered. Obedience does not come from respect, fear, or admiration alone. It comes from psychological positioning so precise that resistance feels more costly than compliance. Most people believe influence requires charisma, wealth, or physical dominance. That belief keeps them powerless. True control operates beneath the surface. It restructures perception so quietly that the influenced believe they are acting freely. Machiavelli wrote that the greatest rulers are those who manipulate minds, not those who command armies. Armies require maintenance. Minds once shaped govern themselves. This is not about manipulation for cruelty. This is about understanding the mechanics of obedience so you are never on the receiving end unknowingly. Whether in business, relationships, or social hierarchies, the same principles apply. Those who understand them lead. Those who don't follow. Obedience is a response to structure, not force. Force creates rebellion. Structure creates inevitability. When someone feels that obeying you is the only logical path forward, resistance dies before it begins. That is Machiavellian mastery. Not coercion, not persuasion, strategic redefinition of reality itself. You are about to learn 7 psychological mechanisms that make obedience automatic. These are not theories. They are observations extracted from history's most effective leaders, manipulators, and strategists. Machiavelli studied them. We are applying them. Before we begin, drop this affirmation in the comments. I engineer obedience. Obedience does not begin with commands. It begins with perception. Machiavelli understood that whoever defines the situation controls the outcome. Frame is everything. It determines what questions are asked, what options appear available, and what responses seem rational. When you control the frame, you control choice without removing freedom. Most people enter situations passively. They accept the frame they are given. The meeting is framed as a negotiation, so they negotiate. The conversation is framed as a debate, so they argue. The relationship is framed as equal, so they hesitate to lead. This passivity is submission. The one who sets the frame is already dominant before a single word is spoken. Framing is not lying, it is selective emphasis. You do not change facts, you change which facts matter. A price is not expensive or cheap on its own. Context makes it so. A request is not unreasonable or fair inherently. The frame decides. When you position your demand inside a frame that makes refusal seem illogical, selfish, or costly, obedience follows naturally. Machiavelli observed that effective rulers do not ask for loyalty. They create conditions where disloyalty appears suicidal. The frame is not, will you follow me? The frame is, survival requires alignment. One invites choice, the other removes it psychologically. Consider how options are presented. If you offer 2 choices, people believe they are deciding freely. But if both choices serve your interest, freedom is an illusion. This is called a false binary. Machiavelli used it constantly. You can support me or face chaos. Both options assume his centrality. Refusal isn't even on the menu. Another method is reframing resistance as irrationality. When someone hesitates, you don't argue. You reposition their hesitation as confusion, fear, or short-sightedness. I understand this feels uncomfortable, but let's focus on what actually matters here. You just dismiss their concern without addressing it. You redefine the conversation. Now they are defending their hesitation instead of questioning your request. Framing also controls emotional context. The same action can be framed as aggressive or assertive, desperate or determined, selfish or strategic. Words shape perception. Perception shapes compliance. When you describe your demand as necessary, obvious, or aligned with shared goals, resistance requires the other person to oppose necessity, clarity, or cooperation. Most people won't. Tone reinforces frame. Calm authority signals that the matter is already settled. Urgency signals that delay is dangerous. Indifference signals that their participation is replaceable. Each tone creates a different psychological pressure. The frame is not just W. Hat, you say. It's how reality feels when you say it. Machiavelli warned that those who let others define the terrain lose before the conflict begins. Terrain is not physical. It is conceptual. It is the implicit rules of engagement. When someone else sets those rules, you are playing their game. When you set them, they are reacting inside your design. Never accept the frame you are given. Redefine it immediately. If someone says we need to talk, you respond. About what specifically? You just shifted the frame from emotional urgency to rational clarity. If someone frames a request as a favor, you reframe it as an exchange. Happy to help. What are you offering in return? You removed the implicit obligation. Obedience is easier than resistance when the frame makes disobedience look foolish, costly, or irrelevant. Build that frame first. Every interaction is a battle for psychological terrain. Win it silently and commands become unnecessary. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I control the frame. People obey those they need. Machiavelli understood that dependency is the foundation of reliable obedience. Fear can create temporary submission. Respect can inspire sporadic loyalty, but need creates sustained compliance. When someone cannot function without you, disobedience becomes self-destructive. Dependency is not always material. It is often psychological, social, or informational. The person who controls access to resources, validation, or knowledge holds structural power. This power does not require enforcement. It enforces itself. The dependent party regulates their own behavior to maintain access. Machiavelli observed that rulers who made themselves indispensable were never overthrown. Those who were replaceable were discarded the moment convenience shifted. Indispensability is protection. It is leverage. It is the difference between conditional and unconditional authority. How is dependency created? Through controlled scarcity. You provide something valuable, but you ensure the supply cannot be easily replicated. This could be expertise, connections, emotional support, or decision-making clarity. Whatever you provide, you make sure others cannot easily get it elsewhere. In professional settings, this means becoming the bottleneck. You do not delegate critical tasks, you handle them personally. This makes you essential. Others begin relying on your input, your approval, your participation. Slowly, the operation cannot proceed without you. You are no longer an employee. You are infrastructure. In personal relationships, dependency is built through emotional exclusivity. You become the primary source of validation, understanding, or excitement. Others begin measuring their worth through your feedback. They check in. They seek approval. They adjust behavior to maintain connection. You did not demand this. You structured it. Machiavelli warned against creating dependency through cruelty or deprivation. That breeds resentment. Dependency must fee. Beneficial. People should feel they are gaining, not losing. They should associate you with improvement, not suffering. Positive dependency is sustainable. Negative dependency invites rebellion. Strategic dependency also involves managing alternatives. If others have options, your leverage weakens. Machiavelli advised rulers to eliminate rival power centers not through violence, but through irrelevance. Make alternatives seem inferior, unstable, or untrustworthy. You do not attack competitors directly. You position yourself as the only reliable choice. Information control is another form of dependency. When you are the sole interpreter of complex situations, others rely on your judgment. They cannot verify independently, so they trust your framing. Machiavelli noted that advisors who controlled information controlled kings. The king believed he was deciding. The advisor was deciding what the king knew. In modern contexts, this appears in gatekeeping. You control access to networks, opportunities, or influential people. Others must go through you. This creates a transactional dependency. Disobedience risks losing access. Compliance maintains it. The choice is obvious. Dependency also includes emotional reliance. When you are calm in chaos, others lean on your stability. When you are decisive in uncertainty, others defer to your direction. You become the anchor. Anchors are not questioned, they are trusted automatically. But dependency must be managed carefully. If people feel trapped, resentment builds. Machiavelli advised providing just enough freedom to maintain the illusion of choice while ensuring that meaningful independence remains out of reach. They should feel empowered, not imprisoned. Empowerment under your framework is control disguised as liberation. There is a balance between dependency and autonomy. Total dependency creates fragility. If you are the only solution, your absence creates collapse. Machiavelli suggested cultivating dependency on your systems, not just your presence. Systems outlast individuals. When people depend on processes you designed, you remain powerful even when absent. Identify what others need. Become the most efficient provider. Limit alternatives subtly. Do not appear possessive. Appear indispensable. When someone thinks I can't do this without them, obedience is no longer a choice. It is survival instinct. Dependency transforms relationships into hierarchies. The one who provides decides the terms. The one who receives complies. This is not cruelty. It is structure. Structure sustains obedience far longer than force ever could. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I am indispensable. Attention is currency. Machiavelli understood that what is freely given loses value. What is withheld gains it. People obey those they perceive as superior. Superiority is not inherent. It is perceived, and perception is shaped by availability. The less accessible you are, the more valuable you seem. Most people believe constant. Availability builds loyalty. It does not. It builds familiarity. Familiarity erodes mystique. Mystique sustains authority. When you are always present, always responsive, always accommodating, you signal that your time has no competing demand. You become convenient, not important. Convenience does not inspire obedience. Importance does. Scarcity creates psychological pressure. When access to you is limited, people begin competing for it. They adjust behavior to earn your attention. They comply preemptively, hoping to secure future engagement. You did not demand this. Scarcity did. Machiavelli observed that rulers who appeared too often became ordinary. Those who appeared selectively became revered. Presence should be an event, not a constant. When you show up, it should matter. This requires intentional absence. Absence builds anticipation. Anticipation builds value. Strategic withdrawal is not disappearance. It is calculated distance. You remain visible enough to stay relevant, but unavailable enough to remain desirable. This balance is delicate. Too much absence creates replacement. Too much presence creates devaluation. The goal is optimal scarcity. In professional environments, this means not responding immediately. Immediate responses signal that you are waiting. Delayed responses signal that you are occupied with something more important. Even if you are not, the perception matters more than the reality. People assume those who are busy are valuable. Value creates deference. Scarcity also applies to validation. When you praise constantly, praise loses impact. When you withhold it, even small acknowledgments feel significant. People begin working harder to earn what you rarely give. This is not cruelty, it is calibration. Machiavelli noted that rewards given sparingly are remembered longer than those given freely. Another dimension is selective engagement. You do not participate in every conversation. You do not attend every meeting. You choose where your presence adds maximum impact. This selectivity signals that your time is finite and therefore precious. Others begin to value interactions with you because they are rare. Scarcity of attention also protects you from overexposure. Overexposure reveals flaws. When people see you constantly, they notice inconsistencies, weaknesses, and patterns. Distance preserves the illusion of perfection. Machiavelli advised that leaders should be seen enough to be remembered, but not so much that they are analyzed. There is a social hierarchy embedded in availability. Those at the bottom are always accessible. Those at the top are not. When you limit access, you signal rank. People unconsciously adjust their behavior to match perceived hierarchy. They become more respectful, more careful, more compliant. Scarcity also creates urgency. When people know your attention is limited, they act faster. They do not delay requests. They do not waste your time. They come prepared. They comply quickly because they fear losing access entirely. This urgency is obedience accelerated, but scarcity must feel natural, not punitive. If people sense you are withholding attention as manipulation, resentment follows. Machiavelli warned that obvious tactics backfire. Scarcity should appear as a consequence of your importance, not as a deliberate strategy. I wish I had more time, but that implies external demand, not internal choice. Do not always be available. Do not always respond first. Do not always say yes. Let people experience the absence of your attention. When they return, they will value it more. When they value it, they adjust to keep it. Adjustment is obedience. Scarcity of attention restructures relationships. The one whose time is scarce becomes the decider. The one whose time is abundant becomes the waiter. Waiters do not give commands, deciders do. Position yourself accordingly. Drop this affirmation in the comments. My attention is scarce. First impressions are not just important, they are foundational. Machiavelli understood that initial perception creates a lens through which all future behavior is interpreted. Once an anchor is set, everything else is measured against it. If you control the anchor, you control the narrative. People do not process information neutrally. They process it relative to existing frameworks. The first framework they encounter becomes the default. This is called anchoring bias. It is one of the most reliable cognitive shortcuts in human psychology. Machiavelli exploited it ruthlessly. When you meet someone, you are not presenting facts. You are installing a reference point. That reference point determines how they evaluate you later. If the anchor is high status, competence, or authority, future interactions are filtered through that lens. Small mistakes are forgiven. Ambiguities are interpreted favorably. You receive the benefit of the doubt automatically. If the anchor is low status, insecurity, or incompetence, the opposite occurs. Even strong performances are questioned. Successes are attributed to luck. You must constantly prove yourself because the initial reference point was weak. This is why Machiavelli advised that rulers must appear strong immediately, even if strength has not yet been earned. Strategic first impressions are constructed, not accidental. You decide what signals to send. Clothing, posture, tone, vocabulary, and emotional control all contribute. Each element should reinforce the anchor you want to install. If you want to be seen as authoritative, you do not ask permission, you state intent. If you want to be seen as competent, you do not apologize. You proceed confidently. Machiavelli noted that people forgive weaknesses in those they already respect, but scrutinize strength in those they do not. This means the initial anchor protects future actions. A strong anchor creates a halo effect. A weak anchor creates suspicion. Both are difficult to reverse once established. Another layer is controlling context. Where you meet someone matters. The environment sets unconscious expectations. Meeting in your space, on your terms, at your chosen time creates home field advantage. You are the host. They are the guest. This asymmetry subtly establishes hierarchy before conversation begins. First impressions also involve managing information flow. You decide what they learn about you first. Machiavelli advised never revealing everything immediately. Mystery sustains interest. Overexposure invites judgment. When you control the pace of revelation, you control the narrative arc. Each new detail should reinforce the anchor, not contradict it. Tone is critical. The first emotional note you strike lingers. If you begin with uncertainty, they hear uncertainty in everything that follows. If you begin with calm authority, they assume authority even when you are unsure. Tone sets the emotional baseline. Baseline shapes interpretation. Anchoring also works in reverse. You can anchor others low to elevate yourself by comparison. Machiavelli observed that rulers often surrounded themselves with visibly weaker advisors. The contrast made the ruler appear more capable. You do not need to diminish others overtly. Proximity to lesser competence highlights your own. In negotiations, anchoring dictates outcomes. The first number mentioned becomes the reference point. If you anchor high, compromises still favor you. If they anchor low, you are fighting uphill. Machiavelli understood that whoever sets the terms wins, even if those terms are later adjusted. Adjustment assumes the original frame. First impressions are also self-reinforcing. Once people form an opinion, they seek information that confirms it. This is confirmation bias. If the anchor is positive, they notice your strengths and overlook weaknesses. If the anchor is negative, the opposite occurs. This is why recovery from a bad first impression is so difficult. The bias works against you automatically. Prepare your first impression deliberately. Decide what anchor you want to install: authority, competence, calm, strength. Then design every element to reinforce it. Walk in with that identity already assumed. Do not build it during the interaction. Install it immediately. Once the anchor is set, maintain consistency. Every deviation weakens it. Machiavelli warned that inconsistency destroys credibility faster than failure. If you anchor as authoritative, do not suddenly seek approval. If you anchor as competent, do not visibly panic. Protect the anchor. It protects you. Anchoring transforms perception into obedience. When people see you as naturally superior, commands feel appropriate. Resistance feels awkward. They comply because the initial impression made compliance seem logical. You did not force it, you framed it. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I control first impressions. Predictability is weakness. Machiavelli understood that when behavior becomes routine, it becomes manageable. People adjust to patterns. They prepare counters. They stop fearing you because they understand you. Understanding removes power. Unpredictability restores it. Obedience thrives in uncertainty. When people cannot predict your response, they become cautious. Caution leads to compliance. They do not know where the boundaries are, so they stay well within assumed limits. You did not define those limits. Their fear of miscalculation did. Most people seek consistency because it feels fair. Fairness is a disadvantage in power dynamics. Machiavelli observed that rulers who were predictable were exploited. Their enemies knew when to attack and when to retreat. Their allies knew how much they could demand. Predictability invited testing. Unpredictability prevented it. Strategic unpredictability is not randomness. Randomness is chaos. Chaos erodes authority. Calculated unpredictability is deliberate variation. You remain in control, but your responses shift unexpectedly. Sometimes you are lenient, sometimes you are harsh, sometimes you are silent, sometimes you are vocal. The inconsistency keeps others off balance. When people cannot predict consequences, they overestimate risk. Overestimation leads to overcorrection. They comply more than necessary because they fear the unknown response. This is psychological leverage. You did not threaten. Uncertainty did. Machiavelli noted that fear is most effective when its application is uncertain. Constant punishment becomes expected. Expected punishment loses impact. But punishment that arrives unpredictably creates perpetual anxiety. Anxiety sustains obedience without requiring continuous enforcement. The same applies to rewards. If you reward predictably, people work only enough to meet the threshold. If you reward unpredictably, they maximize effort, hoping to trigger the reward. This is intermittent reinforcement. It is the psychological mechanism behind gambling addiction. It also makes obedience compulsive. Unpredictability also prevents manipulation. When your patterns are known, others can manipulate you. They know what triggers anger, what earns approval, what softens your position. Machiavelli warned that readable rulers are controlled rulers. Unpredictability removes the script. Without a script, manipulation fails. Another advantage is that unpredictability creates dependency on your judgment. When people cannot predict outcomes, they defer to you. They ask for guidance. They seek approval before acting. You become the interpreter of ambiguous situations. Interpretation is control, but unpredictability must be selective. If you are unpredictable in everything, you appear unstable. Instability erodes trust. Machiavelli advised being consistent in core principles but unpredictable in tactics. This balance maintains authority while preventing exploitation. Remain consistent in your goals but unpredictable in your methods. People know what you want, but never know how you will pursue it. This creates respect for your direction, while maintaining fear of your execution. Both are necessary for sustained obedience. Timing is part of unpredictability. Sometimes you respond immediately, sometimes you delay, sometimes you ignore entirely. The variance keeps people guessing. They cannot calibrate because the pattern keeps shifting. This cognitive load exhausts them. Exhaustion leads to submission. Unpredictability also protects against complacency. When people know exactly what you will do, they relax. Relaxation invites disrespect. Machiavelli observed that familiarity breeds contempt. Unpredictability maintains tension. Tension maintains respect. Unpredictability appears in small variations. You do not always attend meetings. You do not always respond to messages. You do not always enforce rules. The inconsistency makes every interaction feel consequential because they never know which version of you will appear. This also applies to emotional presentation. Sometimes you are warm, sometimes you are cold, sometimes you are engaged, sometimes you are distant. The shifts are intentional, not reactive. They prevent people from developing a stable mental model of you. Without a stable model, they cannot predict or manipulate. Vary your responses intentionally. Do not always react the same way to the same stimulus. Sometimes overlook mistakes, sometimes address them harshly, sometimes reward effort, sometimes ignore it. The variance should feel natural, not forced. The goal is to prevent others from mapping why. Our behavior. Unpredictability creates a psychological environment where compliance feels safer than testing boundaries. People do not know where the line is, so they do not approach it. You did not draw the line. Their uncertainty did. And uncertainty, when managed correctly, is obedience without enforcement. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I am unpredictable. People obey more readily when alternatives are unavailable. Machiavelli understood that resistance requires support. Remove the support, and resistance collapses. Isolation is not physical confinement. It is strategic separation from sources of conflicting influence. When you control the information environment, you control belief. When you control belief, you control behavior. External voices provide validation for doubt. Friends question your authority. Competitors offer alternatives. Independent sources introduce conflicting narratives. Machiavelli observed that rulers who allowed free flow of information faced constant challenges. Those who controlled information faced none. Isolation does not mean locking people away. It means becoming the primary source of interpretation. You do not prevent them from hearing other perspectives. You discredit those perspectives before they gain traction. You position yourself as the only reliable filter for truth. Once positioned, they voluntarily disregard alternatives. This begins with monopolizing time. When someone spends most of their time in your sphere, competing influences weaken, their social circle narrows, their information sources consolidate. You do not force this. You make your environment compelling enough that they choose it. Machiavelli called this willing captivity, the most sustainable form of control. Another method is creating dependency on your narrative. You explain the world in ways that make sense. You provide clarity in confusion. You offer certainty in chaos. Others begin relying on your explanations because they simplify complexity. Once reliant, they stop seeking alternative explanations. Why would they? Yours already works. Machiavelli noted that information control is more powerful than physical control. Physical control requires force. Information control requires framing. Framing is invisible. When people believe they are thinking independently while actually processing only the information you provided, obedience becomes self-imposed. Isolation also involves discrediting external sources. You do not forbid others from listening to competitors. You subtly undermine their credibility. That's one perspective, but consider the source. You just planted doubt without direct confrontation. Doubt is enough. Once credibility is questioned, influence weakens. In relationships, isolation appears as subtle social engineering. You encourage connections that reinforce your worldview. You discourage connections that challenge it, not overtly, through scheduling, tone, or indirect suggestion. I'm not sure they have your best interests in mind. You did not command. You expressed concern. Concern feels protective, not controlling. Machiavelli warned that isolation must feel natural. If people sense they are being separated from others, resistance follows. Isolation should appear as their choice. They should feel they are distancing themselves from negativity, not being distanced by you. Autonomy, even when engineered, prevents rebellion. Another layer is controlling access to you. When you are the gatekeeper to resources, opportunities, or information, others must go through you. This dependency creates informational isolation. They learn only what you choose to share. You become the lens through which reality is perceived. This is especially effective in professional hierarchies. When you filter information before it reaches subordinates, you shape their understanding. Machiavelli observed that kings were controlled by advisors who controlled what the king knew. The king believed he was deciding. The advisor was curating options. Isolation also prevents coalition formation. When people interact primarily through you, they do not organize independently. You mediate. Mediation is control. Machiavelli noted that divided groups are easier to govern. Unity requires communication. When you control communication, unity becomes impossible. In modern contexts, this appears as information silos. You share different information with different people. None has the full picture, only you do. This fragmentation prevents collective action. Each person knows only their part. You are the only one who sees the whole. Wholeness is power. Isolation also extends to validating emotions. When someone feels uncertain, they seek validation. If you are the primary validator, you shape their emotional reality. You're right to feel that way, or that's an overreaction. Both install your judgment as the standard. Over time, they internalize your voice. Internal voices are the most obedient. Position yourself as the primary interpreter of reality. Discredit alternatives subtly. Monopolize time and attention. Create informational dependency. Prevent coalition formation by fragmenting communication. All of this should feel supportive, not restrictive. Isolation transforms obedience into reflex. When your voice is the loudest, most consistent, and most trusted, commands are not questioned. They are internalized. Internalization is the final stage of control. The person obeys not because you demanded it, but because they believe it is correct. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I control the narrative. Obedience is most sustainable when it becomes habit. Machiavelli understood that consistent behavior requires conditioning. Conditioning is most powerful when rewards are unpredictable. Predictable rewards create transactional relationships. Unpredictable rewards create psychological dependency. This is intermittent reinforcement. It is the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. The uncertainty of reward triggers dopamine more effectively than certainty. People do not work hardest when success is guaranteed. They work hardest when success is possible but uncertain. Machiavelli exploited this without naming it. When you reward obedience every time, people comply only when reward is expected. Compliance becomes calculated. They perform the minimum required to trigger the reward. This is efficient, but not loyal. Machiavelli observed that mercenaries fought for pay, citizens fought for glory. Glory is unpredictable, pay is not. Glory inspired greater sacrifice. Intermittent reinforcement works because the brain cannot distinguish between no reward yet and no reward ever. Each act of obedience feels like it might be the one that triggers acknowledgement. This hope sustains effort far longer than certainty. Hope is cheaper than payment. It also generates more compliance per unit of reward. The key is variation. Sometimes you acknowledge immediately, sometimes you wait, sometimes you provide significant recognition, sometimes you offer minimal acknowledgement. The inconsistency prevents calibration. People cannot predict what level of effort will earn what level of reward, so they maximize effort, hoping to trigger maximum reward. Machiavelli noted that rulers who were generous unpredictably were loved more than those who were consistently generous. Consistent generosity becomes expected. Expected generosity is not appreciated. Unpredictable generosity feels like a gift. TS inspire gratitude. Gratitude inspires loyalty. This applies to all forms of reward: attention, praise, promotion, inclusion, or validation. When given intermittently, each becomes more valuable. Scarcity increases perceived worth. Worth increases motivation. Motivation increases obedience. Another advantage is that intermittent reinforcement prevents entitlement. When people receive rewards consistently, they begin to feel owed. Entitlement erodes gratitude. Without gratitude, compliance becomes grudging. Machiavelli warned that those who feel entitled eventually rebel. Those who feel grateful remain loyal. Intermittent reinforcement also creates anxiety. People become preoccupied with earning the next reward. Preoccupation focuses their attention on you. You become the center of their effort. They adjust behavior constantly, hoping to trigger acknowledgement. This adjustment is obedience in motion. The pattern should feel random, but is actually controlled. You decide when to reinforce. You decide which behaviors to reward. You decide the magnitude of acknowledgement. This control allows you to shape behavior precisely. You are training, not just managing. Machiavelli also understood that punishment should be consistent, but rewards should be intermittent. Consistent punishment establishes boundaries. Intermittent reward sustains effort. Together, they create an environment where compliance is automatic. Boundaries are clear. Motivation is internal. Do not always act now. Pledge good work. Sometimes you notice, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you praise publicly, sometimes you nod privately, sometimes you promote, sometimes you delay. The variance keeps people striving. Striving is sustained obedience. This also applies to access. Sometimes you are available, sometimes you are not. Sometimes you engage deeply, sometimes you remain distant. The inconsistency makes every moment of access feel valuable. They cannot take it for granted because it is not always there. Intermittent reinforcement also prevents burnout. When people know exactly what is required, effort becomes mechanical. Mechanical effort lacks passion. Passion requires uncertainty. Uncertainty sustains engagement. Engagement sustains obedience. But the baseline must be positive. Intermittent reinforcement works only when the relationship is generally beneficial. If the baseline is negative, intermittent reward feels manipulative. Machiavelli advised that the foundation should be stability with intermittent highlights. Stability builds trust, highlights build excitement. Both are necessary. Do not reward every act of compliance. Vary acknowledgement intentionally. Sometimes reward immediately, sometimes delay, sometimes reward generously, sometimes minimally. The pattern should prevent prediction while maintaining hope. Hope sustains effort. Effort sustains obedience. When obedience becomes compulsive, enforcement becomes unnecessary. People comply automatically, hoping for the next act. Acknowledgement. They do not know when it will come, only that it might. Possibility is more powerful than certainty. And in that possibility, you hold absolute control. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I reward strategically. Obedience is not forced, it is engineered. Machiavelli understood that true power does not announce itself. It positions itself so precisely that resistance feels illogical. When you control the frame, create dependency, manage attention, anchor perception, deploy unpredictability, isolate influence, and reward intermittently, obedience becomes automatic. These principles are not manipulations. They are observations of how authority actually functions. Leaders throughout history have applied them, often without naming them. Machiavelli simply documented what worked. What worked then works now. Human psychology has not changed. Most people fear power because they associate it with cruelty. Machiavelli did not advocate cruelty. He advocated effectiveness. Effectiveness sometimes appears harsh, but harshness is not the goal. Control is. And control, when executed correctly, feels natural to those being controlled. The difference between tyranny and leadership is perception. Tyrants force compliance through fear alone. Leaders engineer compliance through structure. Structure outlasts fear. Structure sustains itself. When obedience is embedded in the environment, enforcement becomes unnecessary. Every principle serves one purpose: removing resistance before it forms. When people believe they are choosing freely while actually operating inside your design, you have achieved Machiavellian mastery. They comply because the alternative feels impossible, illogical, or undesirable. You did not threaten. You redefined reality. This is not about dominating others for ego. It is about understanding the mechanics of influence so you are never dominated unknowingly. Those who understand these principles lead. Those who do not follow. Leadership is not accidental. It is constructed. You do not need to apply all 7 principles simultaneously. Mastery comes from selective application. Assess the situation, identify which principle creates maximum leverage, deploy it precisely. Machiavelli advised economy of effort. Why use force when framing achieves the same result? Why argue when silence is more powerful? Why demand when dependency makes demands unnecessary? Power is not loud. It is quiet. It is calm. It is inevitable. When you position yourself correctly, obedience follows naturally. People adjust around you without realizing they are adjusting. This is the highest form of control. Influence that does not feel like influence. Before we end, if you found this valuable, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Drop a comment below with the final affirmation. I engineer obedience. Every time you reinforce this mindset, you strengthen the framework of your authority. Remember, power is rarely in what you take. It is in what cannot be taken. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. Most people chase influence as if it were a prize. They argue, explain, justify, and exhaust themselves in the pursuit of control that was never theirs to hold. True mastery is the opposite. It is positioning. It is structure. It is psychological terrain so well designed that obedience becomes the path of least resistance. You do not need to announce your authority. You do not need to justify your decisions. You do not need approval or validation. When the framework is correct, people comply because compliance makes sense. They follow because following feels right. They obey because disobedience feels costly, illogical, or unnecessary. This is not domination, it is liberation. Liberation from the exhausting cycle of forcing, arguing, and defending. When you engineer obedience, you remove friction, you remove resistance, you remove the need to fight for what should already be yours. Authority is not taken, it is installed. Install it correctly and it maintains itself. The highest victory is not defeating your enemies. It is making your enemies irrelevant. The highest power is not controlling others. It is controlling the conditions under which others make decisions. When you control conditions, you control outcomes. When you control outcomes, you control everything. Be strategic, be patient, be invisible. And remember, obedience is not demanded, it is designed.